In 1665, two kings hatched an illegal backroom plot to plunder the wealthiest Allied fleet. The conspiracy was flawless on paper, but it collapsed because the Royal Mail ran late. The target was the Dutch East India Company's return fleet. Twice a year, these heavy merchant ships sailed back from the East Indies to the Dutch Republic, carrying the absolute most valuable cargo available in the 17th century. The holds were packed with raw diamonds, 18,000 pearls, massive quantities of silk and porcelain, and millions of pounds of exotic spices like nutmeg and cloves. This chart compares the estimated market value of that cargo against the national finances of the era. The fleet's goods were worth around 11 million guilders. This single convoy held more wealth than the entire annual revenue of the Danish-Norwegian crown. Getting that wealth home safely was an immediate problem. It was the middle of the Second Anglo-Dutch War, and the English naval fleet was actively hunting Dutch ships to capture their cargo and fund the English war effort. To evade the English blockade, the Dutch merchantmen sailed north, seeking shelter in Vågen, a neutral bay in the Norwegian city of Bergen. There, they anchored directly under the heavy guns of the historic Bergenhus and Sverresborg fortresses. By simply dropping anchor, the Dutch dragged their geopolitical baggage with them. The quiet, neutral harbor of Vågen suddenly held the highest concentration of wealth in Europe, making it the center of a major naval conflict. On paper, the Dutch were safe. Denmark-Norway, which controlled Bergen, was officially allied with the Dutch Republic by treaty. The local fortresses were obligated to protect the merchants. But the official treaties ignored a secret agreement. King Frederick III of Denmark-Norway and King Charles II of England had both accumulated massive personal debts, and they saw the Dutch fleet as a way to wipe their ledgers clean. The monarchs formed an off-the-book syndicate. Frederick agreed to order his fortress commanders to stand down and let the English capture the Dutch ships in the harbor. In exchange, the two kings would personally split the stolen 11 million guilder cargo. Operating on this private deal, an English naval flotilla sailed into Bergen in early August. They positioned their ships at the mouth of the bay, expecting a bloodless surrender and a massive payout. The geopolitical trap was perfectly set. It relied entirely on one specific detail. The local Norwegian fortress commanders needed to receive King Frederick's secret stand-down orders before the English fleet arrived. The entire plot broke down on the logistics of 17th century mail delivery. King Frederick's career, carrying the critical orders to allow the ambush, was delayed in transit, leaving the local commanders blind to the conspiracy. An English envoy rode ashore to coordinate the attack, bluffing that his fleet carried 6,000 men. The Norwegian commanders, following their standing orders to protect the neutral port, refused to let a foreign military capture ships in their waters. Realizing the English were blockading the bay, Dutch Commodore Peter de Bitter scrambled to organize a defense. He hastily recalled his sailors from shore leave by ringing the city's church bells. Knowing his merchant crews lacked combat experience, de Bitter engaged in psychological warfare. He promised his men 3 months of extra wages if they survived, and ordered musicians to play the Dutch national anthem over the water to taunt the English line. The situation was highly ironic. The Norwegian commanders were strictly following military protocol to defend the port. By doing exactly what they were supposed to do, they were actively ruining their own king's lucrative illegal robbery. Early on the morning of August 2nd, the standoff collapsed. Frustrated by the delay and lacking coordination, the English commander decided to launch a direct assault on the blocked harbor anyway. This diagram shows the severe geographical disadvantage the English faced. The bay entrance was a narrow bottleneck. Positioned downwind, English gunners overcompensated, their shots splashing harmlessly short. Fierce southern winds then blew directly back, pushing thick smoke from their own cannons into their ships, blinding the gunners. A stray English cannonball hit the fortress. The Norwegian commanders, still unaware of the royal plot, retaliated. The heavy, elevated shore batteries opened fire directly into the English fleet. Caught between the Dutch merchant guns and the shore batteries, the English took heavy casualties. After 3 hours of pounding, the panicked crews were forced to cut their anchor ropes and retreat to the open sea. The ambush was a total disaster. The combination of 13th century defensive architecture, a narrow bottleneck, and a simple shift in wind neutralized an invading 17th-century naval force. 6 days after the English retreated, the delayed courier finally arrived in Bergen. The Norwegian commanders opened the letters and discovered their king's orders to stand down and let the attack happen. Realizing the error, the Norwegians offered the English a second chance to attack without interference. The English declined. The element of surprise was gone, and the Dutch had spent the week stringing a defensive chain across the bay and installing 100 additional guns. The Dutch return fleet remained in the harbor until late August. When they finally attempted to sail home, the convoy was struck by a severe hurricane, scattering the ships across the North Sea. The English managed to capture a few of these straggling merchant ships, but the fleet commander, the Earl of Sandwich, was caught illegally selling cargo from the hulls and skimming £4,000 for himself. He was publicly disgraced and stripped of his command. The failure at Bergen carried massive geopolitical consequences. Enraged by the English attack on their neutral port, Denmark-Norway accepted heavy subsidies from the Dutch Republic and officially declared war on England. The failure of the postal system ended the Royal Syndicate, humiliated the English Navy, and drove Denmark-Norway into a formal declaration of war. The battle also left a permanent mark on the physical and military layout of Bergen. Realizing how vulnerable the port was to a sudden naval assault, the city immediately commissioned the construction of the Fredericksburg Fortress to watch over the bay. The legacy of this bizarre royal blunder is still visible to anyone walking through the city today. A stray English cannonball from the 1665 ambush remains lodged firmly in the stone of the Bergen Cathedral.